The cat was staring at me again, like I was the one who committed a crime. She sat on the kitchen counter, like a little white judge in a fur coat. Golden eyes narrowed, tail flicking with slow, deadly judgment. I nudged her bowl with my foot. "Don't look at me like that, princess," I muttered. "I'm not the one who got arrested." She blinked, slowly, disappointed in my life choices. I sighed and checked the cabinet anyway. Even though I already knew what was in there, one half-empty bag of ridiculously overpriced grain-free salmon kibble, and a jar of peanut butter that technically expired 2 months ago but was still in denial about it. That food costs more than my rent, I told her, tearing the bag open. "You know that, right? You are literally eating my future," she meowed. The spoiled, entitled sound of someone who had never worked a day in her life. "My name is Emma Reyes. I'm 27, unemployed again, and currently being silently judged by a cat that technically isn't even mine. I live alone in a tiny, slightly depressing apartment in downtown Phoenix. The kind of place where the air conditioner wheezes like an asthmatic elderly person, and the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbors argue about crypto. And for the last 7 months, I've been taking care of my neighbor's cat. I pour the kibble into her bowl and watch her immediately dive in, like I haven't fed her in years. Drama queen. Your real owner, I say, leaning against the counter, is probably somewhere laughing at both of us. The thing about my neighbor is no one ever says his name. Not casually. Anyway, it's always a whisper in the hallway. A lowered voice in the elevator. You know who in the laundry room? Powerful. Dangerous. Untouchable. Those are the words people use. I didn't know him. Not really. I knew he lived in 6B. I knew he drove cars that looked like they belonged to movie villains. I knew the building manager suddenly became very polite whenever he passed by. And then one day, I knew something else. He got arrested. Cops. Sirens. A black SUV. Half the building watched through half-open blinds while they led him out in cuffs. I watched from my door, hugging a grocery bag to my chest, trying to look like I hadn't just dropped my cereal when I heard the noise. The official story said financial crimes. The unofficial story said Mafia. The whispers that floated around the mailroom said his name, like a warning Dominic Vale. 7 months ago, after they hauled him away, animal control showed up at his door. Someone had called about a cat left alone in the apartment. I'd been on my way down the stairs with a tub of laundry and a broken soul when I saw them at his door, with a carrier. "We're here for the animal," one of the officers said. The cat had meowed from inside. A startled, lonely sound. I don't know what possessed me. I just remember my mouth opening before my brain caught up. "I can take her." It bloated. "Just until he gets back." They looked at each other like, "Sure, sweetheart. He's not coming back." But they let me sign a form and carry her home anyway. So now I'm a broke, jobless, single woman in a crappy apartment, feeding someone else's designer cat food out of a chipped ceramic bowl, staring at the luxury condo building across the street, and wondering if this is rock bottom or just an artistic phase. The afternoon sun slants through the blinds, turning the dust in the air into glitter. Phoenix is loud outside cars. Heat. A siren somewhere far off. Inside, it's just me. The hum of the old fridge. And the crunch of expensive kibble. "Congratulations," I tell the cat. "You've officially eaten better than I have all week." I push away from the counter and wander toward the sliding glass door. From my balcony, you can see everything. The gleaming glass tower across the street. The valet circle full of cars I can't pronounce. The rooftop pool I'll never set foot in. That's where people like Dominic Vale live. Where they used to live. Anyway, he hasn't been back. No one's seen him. The rumors got louder for a while. Then quieter. People moved on. I almost did. I turn back toward the kitchen. The cat's bowl is empty already. She looks up at me like, more? Absolutely not. I say, we are in a recession. You can snack on your own attitude. I grab the bag to roll it up. Still grumbling. Your owner is probably in some minimum security prison, eating better than both of us. He's probably got steak. Pasta. Maybe prison food isn't that great. A deep voice says behind me. Trust me. I freeze. Every hair on my body stands up. The room goes so quiet I can hear the fridge humming, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I turn slowly. Fingers still clenched around the cat food bag. He's standing in my kitchen. Not in a memory. Not in a story. In real life. In my crappy apartment. In my too bright kitchen. Like he just walked in from work, and not from 7 months in a cell. Dominic Vale. He's taller than I remember from the hallways. Broader through the shoulders. His dark hair is shorter now. Swept back in a way that makes him look sharper. More dangerous. He's wearing a black dress shirt rolled to his forearms. The top button's open, just enough to show a hint of gold chain and tan skin. His eyes grey. Cold. Way too focused lock onto mine like he's been looking for me for a long time. I grip the cat food bag harder. This is a really specific hallucination. I say weakly. One corner of his mouth twitches. Hi. Emma. He remembers my name. Somehow. That's the part that knocks the air out of my lungs. I swallow. You're supposed to be in prison. He shrugs slightly. Like we're talking about a weekend trip, and not a felony conviction. They let me out early. For good behavior, for lack of proof. He says. His gaze drops briefly to the cat, now weaving around his legs. Purring like a traitor. And overcrowding, the cat abandons me immediately. Of course. She rubs against his ankle. Purring so loud, it's almost obscene. He bends. Scoops her up one-armed. And she melts into him, like this is the moment she's been waiting for. You blink. Are you kidding me? I feed you. I clean your litter. I buy your pretentious free-range, artisan salmon. And you just defect like that. He glances up at me over the cat's head. There's amusement in his eyes now. Faint, but real. She remembers me. He says, yeah. Well, she has terrible taste in men. I shoot back. Because my mouth and my survival instinct are not on speaking terms. He actually laughs. It's low and rough. Like he hasn't used it much lately. The sound slides under my skin and settles somewhere I don't want to acknowledge. My brain finally kicks into gear. How did you get in here? He tilts his head toward my front door. You forgot to lock it. I did great. Just another item for my list of life mistakes. You shouldn't do that. He adds. Not in this building. I snort. Yeah. Well? I thought the worst criminal around here was already in jail. So? He smilefades just a fraction. Not offended. Exactly. Moi. Tia. Is that what they call me now? The worst criminal. They call you a lot of things. I say. Mostly in whispers. In elevators. Near fire exits. And what do you call me, he asks. Currently, I say. An unannounced guest. He sets the cat down gently on the counter. She stays close. Tail flicking. Eyes watching both of us, like she's monitoring a live soap opera. I came to see my cat. He says. She's been living with me. I reply. For 7 months. Technically. That makes her my cat now. That's common law or something. His eyes soften. Just a little. You didn't have to take her. No. I say, I just enjoy being broke and emotionally manipulated by small animals. His gaze lingers on me in that way that makes it hard to breathe. It's too focused, too intent. Like he sees more than I'm willing to show. Thank you. It says quietly. For taking care of her. I shrug. Looking away. Somebody had to... They were going to send her to a shelter. She doesn't deserve that. No. He says. You don't. I look back at him quickly. What's that supposed to mean? Before he can answer. There's a sound from the hallway. A heavy thud. A muffled curse. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up again. But this time, it's not because of him. He hears it too. I see the shift happen, like someone flipped a switch inside him. The easy amusement drains from his face. His posture straightens. His eyes go flat and cold and calculating. Stay here, he murmurs. I open my mouth to argue. But the doorknob is already rattling. The door flies inward. Slamming against the wall. Two men step in big. Broad. Wearing cheap suits that don't quite fit. And expressions that say they're not here to talk. Wow. I say before I can stop myself. I don't remember inviting anyone else to this party. The taller one barely glances at me. His eyes lock on Dominic instead. Vale. He says, with a grin. That doesn't reach his eyes. Didn't take you long. Huh? Out for 5 minutes. And already causing trouble. Dominic doesn't smile. He doesn't move. He just steps slightly in front of me. And suddenly, there's a broad, solid wall of man between me and the strangers. You're in the wrong apartment, he says calmly. The shorter guy snorts. We're right where we need to be. I notice the bulge under his jacket. My stomach drops. Gun. My hands start to shake. I grab the nearest object, a squeaky mouse toy, and immediately question every decision that led to this moment. Hey, I say weakly. Holding it up. Violence is bad for the security deposit. Dominic doesn't look back at me. But I feel the slightest shift of his shoulder. Like he's bracing. You have 5 seconds to leave. He says. Still calm. Still quiet. Way too quiet. The taller man laughs. Or what, you gonna shoot us? You're on probation. Man. One wrong move. And you're right back inside. I don't need a gun. Dominic says. And then he proves it. I don't actually see him move. 1 second, he's standing there. Empty-handed. The next. The taller guy is pinned against the wall, with his arm twisted behind his back. And the shorter one is stumbling. Cursing. A knife clattering to the floor from somewhere I didn't see. The cat bolts under the table with a hiss. 3 seconds. Dominic says softly, into the first man's ear. Okay. Okay, the shorter one blurts. Backing toward the door. Hands up. We get it. Message delivered. Dominic lets the taller man go with a shove. They both stumble into the hallway. Tripping over each other in their rush to get away. If you come near her again, Dominic adds. His voice suddenly colder than the freezer. You won't walk out next time. The taller man looks at me then. Like he's really seeing me for the first time. Something ugly flickers in his eyes. Didn't know you had a civilian now? He says. Smart move. Vale. Real smart. Dominic takes 1 step forward. They bolt. The door slams. Their footsteps fade down the hall. Silence rushes back in like a wave. Loud and buzzing. I realize I'm still holding the squeaky toy. What the hell was that, I whisper. He turns to me slowly. The hard edge in his eyes softens when he looks at me. But just barely. That, he says, was a reminder that I'm not out of danger yet. And me, I ask, my voice barely working. What does that make me? His gaze drags over my face. Like he's checking for damage. For blue. For anything broken. Involved. He says. Whether you like it or not. My laugh comes out high and thin. Fantastic. Love that for me. He takes a breath. Like he's been holding one since the moment he stepped through my door. You're not safe here anymore. Emma. Well, I was doing great until you showed up. I say. But the joke doesn't land. Not even for me. He looks at the splintered door frame. The scuff marks on the floor. The space where those men stood a moment ago. When he speaks again, his voice is low and final. Pack a bag. I stare at him. Excuse me. You're coming with me. I want to argue. I want to tell him absolutely not. Mafia boy. Go fix your own problems. But the image of that gun-shaped bulge, the way those men looked at me like I was something they could use. My hand tightens around the toy until it squeaks pathetically. Dominic takes a step closer. Close enough that I can smell his cologne, dark and expensive, and deeply unfair. You took care of my family. He says softly. That makes you mine now. Somewhere in my chest. Something cracks right down the middle. I should say no. I know that. Instead, I hear myself whisper. How big of a bag? If hell had air conditioning and a better dress code. It would probably look like the place Dominic drove me to. After an hour of highway and silence, the city melted away into desert. Then the desert melted into this. The road curved up. A low hill lined with palm trees, too perfectly placed to be an accident. At the top sat a house or an estate, all clean lines and glass, tucked behind a high, simple wall that screamed private without needing spikes or barbed wire. Not a gaudy mobster mansion. No statues. No fountains shaped like lions. Just quiet. Expensive. And terrifyingly intentional. The kind of place where everything is designed to look peaceful, so you forget what it takes to keep it that way. I stared through the windshield as the gate slid open. So this is where you keep all your secrets. I muttered. Some of them. Dominic said. We rolled up the driveway. Men moved around the property gardener. Delivery guy. Someone by the garage, but none of them felt normal. Their eyes tracked the car. Their posture. Relaxed but ready. Matched the tension humming off Dominic's shoulders. I suddenly became very aware of my wrinkled t-shirt, and the fact that my entire life was currently stuffed into a tote bag at my feet. He parked beneath a shaded overhang and cut the engine. For a second. Neither of us moved. The quiet pressed in, broken only by the ticking of the cooling hood, and my heartbeat thudding too loud in my ears. Emma, he said finally, turning toward me. You're safe here. Sure, I said. Because when I picture safe, I definitely picture hidden estates in the middle of nowhere, guarded by part-time Navy SEALs, who water the hedges. His mouth twitched. You can go back if you want, to the apartment with the broken door, and the men who already know where you live. I glared at him. Because he was infuriating, and also right. That's what I thought. He said softly. Inside. The house smelled like lemon, and something warm espresso. Maybe. The floors were pale stone. Cool under my sneakers. Sunlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows, making everything look like a magazine spread, for people who use summer as a verb. It should have been beautiful. It was beautiful. I hated it on sight. It was too big. Too quiet. Too not mine. Every surface looked like it would judge me if I put a water glass directly on it. You live here alone? I asked. For now, he said. I pretended I didn't hear the implication in that. A woman in a simple black dress appeared from a hallway. Her expression calm, almost bored. "Mr. Vale," she said. "We were told to expect you tomorrow. Change of plans?" He replied. He inclined his head toward me. "This is Emma. She's a guest. She stays as long as she wants. She eats better than my cat. And no one talks to her unless she talks first." "Understood." My eyebrows shot up. "I can talk to people. You know. I'm unemployed. Not feral." He glanced at me. "You're overwhelmed." "It's normal." He said it like he'd seen it a dozen times before. Like he'd brought other lost creatures here and watched them pace the marble. That thought made something twist in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was jealousy or nausea. The woman nodded and disappeared as silently as she'd arrived. I dropped my tote bag in the entryway. Suddenly exhausted. So what now do I get? Like a panic room tour, emergency exit routes, Mafia house orientation. You get food. He said. You haven't eaten. My stomach betrayed me with a low growl right on cue. Perfect. He led me to a bright, white kitchen that looked like it belonged in a cooking show. Too many appliances. Not enough actual human mess. He poured me water. Then coffee. Then somehow, within 10 minutes, there was a plate of food in front of me that looked like it cost more than my weekly groceries. I eyed it suspiciously. If I eat this, do I owe you my soul? You already gave me 7 months of favor. He said. This is interest. I took a bite. My eyes closed without my permission. Okay. I mumbled. If this is a cult, I kind of get it. When I finally looked up, he was just watching me. Not in a creepy way. In a focused way. His expression had softened. The hard angles of his face, gentled by the morning light. You don't have to stare, while I chew. I said, You're making it oddly intimate. He huffed out something between a laugh and a sigh, and leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. With anyone else, the pose might have looked casual. On him, it looked like restrained tension. You're angry, he said. I was kidnapped. I corrected. In a luxury car. Sure, with leather seats and great suspension, but still technically kidnapped. You got in willingly. Willingly is a strong word. He tilted his head. You would have stayed, after they found you. Once I thought about the broken door. About those men's eyes, when they looked at me like I was a problem they wanted to solve with a weapon. I pushed my plate away. No. I said quietly. I wouldn't have stayed. He studied me for a moment. Then nodded, like that settled something inside him. The rest of the day blurred. I wandered the house because sitting still felt impossible. Every room looked like it had been carefully curated by someone with impeccable taste and a deep fear of personal clutter. There was a library that smelled like old paper and money. A living room with a wall of glass facing the desert. The city, a distant glitter on the horizon. A pool that looked like it was waiting for a photo shoot. Everywhere I went, there were people, not many, but enough staff. Maybe security. Maybe both. They all looked at me with polite curiosity, and then away. Like they'd been told not to stare. And always, in mi peripheral vision, there was him. Never intrusive. Never hovering. Just present. On the phone in the hallway. At the edge of a doorway. Leaning against a balcony rail, while I pretended I was just out there for the view. Every time I turned a corner, he seemed to already know I'd be there, at lunch. When I reached automatically for the smallest portion, his voice came from behind me. Eat more, he said. I'm fine. You trembled this morning, when you held a coffee mug. I trembled because men broke into my home and threatened to kill you in front of me. One corner of his mouth curled. So you admit you were worried for me? I rolled my eyes. I was worried about my security deposit. Still. When I refilled my plate, I felt his gaze linger. Satisfied. Later. When two men arrived at the front gate in a black car, Dominic stepped in front of me without even looking back. Just one hand at the small of my back, guiding me, moving me further inside, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Stay near the kitchen, he said. I'll handle it. Handle what I demanded. Is this where you go full Mafia, and I just hide behind the refrigerator? He met my eyes. Serious? Now, this is where you let me do what I'm good at, so you don't end up collateral damage. I hated that the words made sense. I hated how my feet obeyed even as my pride screamed, not to. That night, I found him outside on the back terrace. A glass in his hand. His posture relaxed but his jaw tight. The desert stretched out behind him. Dark and endless. The sky smeared with stars. Pretty. I said, stepping up beside him. Looks peaceful. It's not. He murmured. You mean the desert? Or your life? He glanced sideways at me. Both. We stood there in silence for a moment. The night air was cooler than the day, but still carried that dry, baked heat that clung to your skin. Someone took it, he said suddenly. Took what, my life? He replied. My business. I built something from nothing. Spent years making it untouchable. Then I get locked up. And one of my own decides it's his turn to sit on the throne. My throat tightened around the word throne. They want you dead. I said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes. And me. His fingers tightened around the glass. The muscles in his forearm flexing. You're leverage now, he said. They see you. They see a way to hurt me that doesn't involve bullets. My heart thudded painfully hard. So I'm in the middle of a mafia war. By accident. He finally looked at me fully. His gaze heavy and unflinching. You're here. Because I trust you. He said. And that makes you a target. Something inside me lurched. I had expected fear. Anger. Maybe guilt. I hadn't expected the warmth that came with the words I trust you. That's a terrible security strategy. I muttered. You should get a therapist. He huffed out a soft laugh. But there was no real humor in it. The next day, I met the problem in the flesh. He arrived in the afternoon in a pale suit that probably cost more than my student loans. His hair was slicked back with too much confidence and too little humility. He walked up the driveway like he owned the pace. Lorenzo Marcella. I watched from just inside the front hall, half hidden behind the line of a column. Because courage is important, but so is survival. Veloci. I whispered to the cat at my feet. Tell me that's just a super aggressive real estate agent. That's him. Dominic said quietly from beside me. I jumped. I hadn't heard him approach. Your ex, I asked. Something like that. He stepped outside. Leaving the door open behind him, I slid a little closer anyway. Enough to hear. Dom. Lorenzo called. Spreading his arms like they were old friends meeting for lunch. You look good for a dead man walking. You're trespassing. Dominic replied. Lorenzo's gaze flicked to the house. And for a second, his eyes met mine through the glass. They lit with amused interest. So this is the new decor, he said. A girl in the window. Cute. Always knew you had a soft spot for strays. My cheeks burned. I started to step back. But a warm hand settled on my hip, steadying me. Stay. Dominic murmured. Then louder. Leave her out of it. Lorenzo's smile sharpened. Sent. She's the most interesting thing you've done in years. He took a step closer. Voice almost playful. You really think you can come back? Sit on your throne? Like, nothing's changed. The crown doesn't go back on your head that easily. Veil. Dominic didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Get off my property, he said. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lorenzo laughed. Light and careless. Enjoy your retirement, he said. While it lasts. He left with the same arrogance he'd arrived with. His words, hanging in the heat, long after the car disappeared. That night, he didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on the floor by the big window in the guest room. Knees pulled to my chest. The cat curled into my side like a warm, judgmental pillow. The house was quiet around me. But the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt loaded. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed softly. Footsteps passed. Then stopped. You're awake, Dominic's voice said from the doorway. He didn't turn. Kind of hard to sleep when someone basically just said, they're going to murder you. And maybe also, your reluctant houseguest. He walked in. His reflection, joining mine in the glass. No suit jacket now. Just a dark t-shirt and sweatpants. And somehow that made him more dangerous. Not less. Like the armor was off, and the real weapon was underneath. I won't let him touch you, he said. You can't promise that. I replied. You don't control everything. I control enough. I finally turned to face him. His hair was a little messy. Like he'd run his hands through it. Too many times. There were faint shadows under his eyes. Is this worth it? I asked. The war. The crown. All of it. His jaw flexed. It's not about the crown. It's about not letting men like Lorenzo decide who lives and who doesn't. We talked then. For a long time. About his family. Growing up with expectations instead of dreams. About prison. The silence that wasn't really silence. The way time stretched and curled in on itself. How betrayal felt less like a knife, and more like having the ground pulled out from under you. I told him about my resume full of jobs I hated and quit. About my dad leaving when I was 10 and my mum working 3 shifts to keep us in an apartment with peeling paint and big dreams. About how I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Even though technically, I already was. At some point, he sat down beside me. Our shoulders brushed. It felt like leaning against a live wire. People in my world don't talk like this, he said quietly. People in my world don't usually threaten to bury people in daylight. I replied. So I guess we're both branching out. His lips curved. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was something else. Something almost warm. When I looked up, he was already looking at me. His eyes dropped to my mouth. Then back to my eyes. A question lingering there. I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. My heart climbed into my throat. He leaned in. Just a fraction, close enough that I could feel his breath on my cheek. Smell the faint hint of coffee, and something darker. The house phone rang. The sound sliced through the moment. Sharp and insistent. He closed his eyes briefly. Like the universe had just personally offended him. Then pushed to his feet. I have to take that, he said. Of course you do, I murmured, trying to sound unaffected while my pulse hammered against my ribs. He hesitated for half a second. Like he wanted to say something else. Then turned and disappeared into the hallway. The next day, Lorenzo stopped playing. It was afternoon. The sun was brutal. The air shimmering above the stone patio. I was in the garden, yes. Apparently there was a garden now, following the cat along a path, edged with desert flowers. She darted toward the side gate. Tail high. Ears perked. Veloce. No, I called. We're not going exploring. Exploring equals getting kidnapped in this zip code. She slipped through a gap in the hedge anyway. I swore under my breath and squeezed through after her. On the other side of the hedge, the property sloped down toward a gravel service road. The cat sat primly at the edge of it, staring at a black car, idling a little too close to the estate line. "Hey," I said, scooping her up. "Stranger danger. Remember, we talked about this." "Emma Reyes," a voice called. I turned. 2 men stood by the car. Suits. Sunglasses. Not Dominic's. I knew that instantly. His men watched without staring. These men devoured. My grip tightened around the cat. "We're here to escort you." One of them said, "Mr. Valsantus." "Funny." I said. He usually sends texts in the form of sarcastic remarks and death threats. Not strangers in rental car suits. The man smiled. Thin and humorless. "You're making this more difficult than it has to be. Story of my life." I said, still a no. The second man stepped forward, hand reaching for my arm. I jerked it back. "Don't touch me." Something flickered in his expression. Frustration. Impatience. His fingers closed around my wrist anyway. Too tight. Browsing. The cat hissed and clawed his sleeve. He swore, shaking his arm, but didn't let go of me. Panic rushed up. Hot and blinding. "Letro." I said. "I mean it." Emma Dominic's voice cracked through the air like a whip. A second later. He was there. I didn't see him come down the path. One moment, it was just me, and 2 strangers. The next, he was between us, shoving the man's hand off me with a force that made him stumble. The temperature in the air seemed to drop 20 degrees. I must not be speaking clearly these days. Dominic said, his voice terrifyingly calm. I said no one goes near her. This wasn't part of the deal. One of the men muttered. Lorenzo said, I don't care what Lorenzo said. Dominic snapped. You touch her again, and there won't be enough left of you to send back to him. The man swallowed hard. For a second, it looked like he might argue. Then he caught the look in Dominic's eyes, and thought better of it. They got in the car, and drove off in a spray of gravel. Their retreat marked by the faint stench of exhaust and bad decisions. My knees wobbled. I sank down onto the nearest stone, clutching the cat like a life raft. Dominic turned to me, the fury bleeding from his face, replaced by something that looked dangerously like fear. Are you hurt? He asked. Just my pride, I said weakly. I really thought I had my life together for about 12 seconds there. He crouched down in front of me, his hands hovering near my arms like he wanted to touch me but wasn't sure where. Why were you out here alone? He demanded. Voice low. Why weren't you inside? I was following the cat, I said, then immediately heard how stupid that sounded. She has bad impulse control. Okay, she gets it from the company. She keeps. Emma, he said. And my name in his mouth felt like something raw. You can't just wander off. Not now. Not when he knows exactly how to get to me. My vision blurred at the edges. Adrenaline. Fear. Frustration. All swirling together until it was hard to breathe. Why? I whispered. He frowned. Why what? Why do you care this much? I asked. The question ripping out of me, before I could stop it. I'm nobody. I'm just the girl who feeds your cat and can't hold a job longer than 6 months. Why put all of this on the line? He looked at me for a long moment. So long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he exhaled slowly, like he was letting go of something heavy. Because you're the first person who sees me as more than a monster, he said. The words settled between us. Heavy and electric. His anger was terrifying. But sitting there in the garden, with gravel digging into my knees, and the sun burning the back of my neck, his fear for me was worse. Because it wasn't cold, or calculated, or strategic. It was real. And for the first time, I realized just how much trouble I was actually in. Not from Lorenzo. From the fact that somewhere between my crappy apartment and this impossible house, I'd started to care too. War didn't start with an explosion. It started with a phone call, the morning after Lorenzo's men tried to drag me off the property. Dominic disappeared into his office and didn't come out for hours. The staff moved around the house like they could feel a storm forming. Quiet and efficient, and giving the closed door a wide berth. I paced the length of the hallway outside like a caged animal. Every now and then I caught fragments of his voice through the wood. Names he didn't recognize, places, instructions that sounded less like business and more like war strategy. Pull them. Freeze the accounts. No. He doesn't get a second chance. By noon, I'd worn a visible path into the expensive rug. When the door finally opened, I almost ran into him. He looked different. Not physically same dark hair. Same sharp jaw. Same shoulders broad enough to block out worry if he stood in the right light. But something in his eyes had shifted. They were colder. Emma. He said, "Let me guess." I said, "You decided to take up knitting and de-escalation workshops." His mouth twitched. It didn't turn into a smile. "You shouldn't be here when this happens," he said. My heart dropped. When what happens, Lorenzo wanted a war. He said, "He has one?" I folded my arms, pretending my hands weren't shaking. "So, that's it. You go full Mafia Avenger and ship me off to some safe house with Wi-Fi. That doesn't work." "Yes," he said simply. "No." I shot back. He stared at me, surprised, like he wasn't used to people saying that to him. "I'm not leaving," I said. "I already got dragged into this. You don't get to decide that I just opt out now. That's not how trauma works." "Dominic." He took a step closer. "This isn't about your feelings. It's about you staying alive." Newsflash. I snapped. Those two things are connected for me. His jaw flexed. For a second, I thought he'd grab me, drag me to a car, force me to go. Instead, he did something worse. He looked at me the way he had the night on the floor by the window, like I had crawled under his skin, and he couldn't scrape me out. "If he can't touch me," he said quietly, "he'll go for you. Then finish this." I replied, "But don't send me away like a piece you're removing from the board. I'm not your weakness. Dominic, I'm your witness." The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise him. Witness. To all of it. To who he was, when the armor slipped. His shoulders lowered a fraction. The fight in his eyes didn't dim, but it shifted. Redirected. "Stay in the house," he said finally. "Don't go near the gates. Don't talk to anyone I haven't introduced you to. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood the swallowed ha. Understood." He brushed past me, his hand grazing my arm. Just the lightest touch. But it burned. That night. He didn't come home until dawn. I knew because I didn't sleep. I sat curled up on one end of the couch, with a cat in my lap, watching the sky turn from black to purple to grey, through the big windows. My phone screen glowed with unanswered messages I hadn't sent. "Are you alive? Are you hurt? Are you losing yourself again?" The front door finally opened as the first lines of pale sunlight slipped across the floor. Dominic stepped in, and my breath caught. There was blood, not soaked, not dripping, but smeared along his knuckles, staining the torn edge of his sleeve, a cut along his cheekbone, a bruise darkening along his jaw. He moved like every step hurt, and he was too tired to show it. Before you freak out, he started. Too late. I was already off the couch, crossing the space between us. What happened? I demanded. Did you win? Did you lose? Are you dying? Blink once for I need a hospital. Twice for Emma. He said. I'm fine. You look like a crash test dummy. It's not my blood. He added. That's not better. I threw my hands up. Why is that supposed to help? The cat jumped down and trotted to him, weaving around his legs and purring like the sight of him, all banged up, was her favorite thing. He glanced down at her, then back at me. His shoulders sagged a little. I need to clean up, he said. Then we'll talk. He turned toward the hallway. For once, I didn't let him go. I grabbed his wrist. He froze. Slowly. He looked down at my fingers on his skin. Then up at my face. You keep saving me. Dominic. I said, my voice softer than I felt. Let someone save you for once. For a second. He just stared at me like he was trying to decide whether to argue or surrender. Then he let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, and almost like defeat. Fine, he murmured. I found the first aid kit, in one of the impossibly neat bathroom cabinets, sat him on the edge of the tub like he was a regular guy who got into regular bar fights. Not a man whose last name made grown adults whisper. Up close. The damage looked worse. The cut on his cheek had already clotted, but the skin around it was angry and tender. His hands were scraped raw. His knuckles looked like he'd punched a wall. Or a person. Or both. This is going to sting. I warned, dabbing antiseptic on a cotton pad. He didn't even flinch. Of course you don't react. I muttered. You probably measure pain in units of federal charges. How many of those have you had? He asked. Emotionally. Several. His lips twitched. Then his gaze dropped to my hands, moving over his skin. Something shifted in his face. Something small and scared, and amazed all at once. Emma, he said quietly. Why are you still here? I paused. Because running never fixed anything, I said slowly. Believe me, I've tried. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. I replied. You keep acting like I'm this fragile little civilian who wandered into your movie. And any second, now I'm going to bolt. But you're forgetting something. He tilted his head. What's that? I chose to feed your cat. I said. No one forced me. I chose to stay when they took you. I chose to come here. And I'm choosing to be here now. With you. In this mess. So stop making decisions for me, like I'm another asset on your balance sheet. He swallowed. The muscles in his jaw worked like the words physically hurt. You don't know what you're signing up for. He said. Neither do you. I shot back. That's kind of the point. He went very still. For a hard bet. The bathroom shrank until there was nothing in it but his eyes on mine, and my hands on his skin, and the sound of our breathing tangled together. Someone cares for you, I said. The truth, tumbling out before I could stop it. Not your power, not your name, not your empire. You, just you. And that scares you more than Lorenzo ever could. Doesn't it? He didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. The answer was there. Plain as the bruise blooming across his jaw. Days blurred together. After that, Dominic was in constant motion calls. Meetings. Brief visits to the house, squeezed between hours, spent somewhere out there. Pulling strings I couldn't see. His enemies turned up broke. Isolated. Cut off from supply lines and crooked alliances. Men who'd sworn loyalty to Lorenzo started quietly switching sides again. The war wasn't loud. It was methodical, surgical. 100 little cuts leading up to something bigger. The something bigger arrived faster than I expected. It came in the form of a warehouse. I knew something was wrong when Dominic woke me up before dawn and told me to get dressed. Where are we going? I asked, shoving my hair into a messy bun and ignoring the way my hands trembled. To end this, he said. The warehouse sat on the edge of the city. One of a dozen identical concrete blocks, baking quietly in the rising heat. This one, however, had a message spray-painted across the side, in dripping red letters. Vale. Come get what's yours. I stared at it through the windshield, my stomach rolling. This feels like an obvious trap. I said. It is. Dominic replied. Okay. Cool. Just checking that we all still have basic cognitive function. We didn't go in right away. His men fanned out first. Moving like a well-rehearsed shadow. Dominic waited. Every line of his body coiled tight. Then a signal came. And we stepped inside. The air in the warehouse was heavy with dust, and the faint chemical tang of old oil. Sunlight cut through cracks in the walls, striping the concrete floor with pale lines. And in the middle of it all, standing atop a stack of crates like he was hosting a game show in hell, was Lorenzo. Dom. He called cheerfully. You came. I was worried you'd gone soft. You called me. Dominic said. Seems like you're the one who needed attention. Lorenzo laughed. Always with the attitude. He jumped down, landing lightly, and started strolling toward us, as if this were a social call and not a standoff. You've been busy, he said. Cutting deals, freezing accounts, stealing men. Very clever. Flattery isn't going to make me forget. You tried to grab her. Dominic replied. Lorenzo's gaze slid to me then. Half hidden behind one of Dominic's men. So she told you, he said. Interesting. I thought maybe you'd try to spare her the ugly parts. She's standing here. Hearing all of this, I muttered. He smiled, like he'd just remembered. I had ears. You're braver than you look. Sweetheart. Go. Choke on your ego. I said before I could stop myself. Dominic's hand brushed the small of my back. A warning and a reassurance all at once. We're not here to talk about her. Dominic said. We're here to talk about you. Yes. Lorenzo said. The betrayal speech. Get it over with. Then kill me. Is that the plan? You were always predictable. Not kill you. Dominic said. I'm done doing your dirty work. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. My dirty work, you set me up. Dominic said quietly. You fed them information. You handed them accounts you opened in my name. You framed me to get me out of the way. I go to prison. You take the throne. Neat little puzzle. Prove it. Lorenzo snapped. And that was the moment I understood. I watched Dominic's face. The way one corner of his mouth twitched. The way his shoulders loosened, just slightly. I was hoping you'd say that, he murmured. He pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. A voice filled the warehouse. Lorenzo's voice. Clipped from a dozen calls. Stitched together into a confession. Yeah. Pin it on Vale. He won't see it coming. Once he's inside. It's Justus. Lorenzo went very still. You bugged me, he whispered. I didn't have to. Dominic said. You bugged yourself. You talk too much. Lorenzo. To the wrong people. He nodded to one of his men. A second later. Red and blue lights flashed silently at the cracked windows. The police swarmed in fast, too fast for this to be anything but coordinated in advance. Guns raised. Shouting. Commanding. Lorenzo reached for his waistband on instinct. Don't, Dominic said sharply. For some reason. Lorenzo listened. He lifted his hands slowly. A dozen guns trained on him. You think this changes anything? He spat as they cuffed him. You think they're going to treat you like a hero? You're a criminal. Dom. With or without me. I know. Dominic said. That's why I gave them everything. Names. Routes. Accounts. I burned it all. There's nothing left to save except what I build after this. Lorenzo stared at him. Stunned. Then, for the first time since I'd seen him, he looked afraid. They took him away, the sirens faded. The warehouse emptied. And just like that, it was over. At least. The loud part was the quiet battle, the one inside Dominic, took a little longer. We stood outside the warehouse, in the harsh morning light. His men drifted away in ones and twos. Handling details I didn't understand. Eventually, it was just the two of us. He looked hollow. Not broken. Just emptied out, like he'd been holding something heavy for so long. He didn't know what to do with his hands now that it was gone. The detectives have everything, he said finally. The recordings. The documents. The transfers. Lorenzo wanted to frame me. And he left a trail a mile long. And you followed it back. I said. He nodded. My lawyer says the charges won't just be dropped. They'll be reversed. I'll be cleared completely. I let that sink in. You're free. I said quietly. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. Like he hadn't let himself do it until this moment. For the first time in my life. He said. His voice rough. I'm free. The words hit me in the chest. I smiled. Would försök? Fragile. Good? I said. You don't need me anymore. His brows pulled together. Like I'd just spoken, a language he didn't understand. What he asked. You're free. I repeated. Your name. Your life. Your empire. You can start over. Clean slate. You don't need the girl who just happened to live across the hall and feed your cat. He stepped closer. Each movement deliberate. I don't need you. Emma. He said. I flinched. Pain shot through me faster than I could hide it. He caught my chin gently, lifting me face until my eyes met his. I want you. He finished. The world narrowed to that one sentence. My breath caught. You don't even know what normal looks like anymore. I whispered. He nodded. No argument in his gaze. Then teach me. Weeks passed. Phoenix changed. Maybe it was just me. Dominic's name stopped appearing in articles next to the word alleged. The whispers in our old building turned to gossip about how charges had been dropped. How it had all been a setup. He started turning his connections towards something else. Something unexpected. Meetings with non-profits. Funding proposals. A charity project for ex-convicts, trying to rebuild their lives. The irony is not lost on me. He said one afternoon. Signing a donation agreement. At the dining table. I'm going to get you a halo. I replied. Solid gold. Very on brand. Somehow. Somewhere between legal paperwork and security upgrades, and teaching him the joy of drive-through milkshakes at midnight. We fell into something that felt suspiciously like normal. The public didn't see all of that. Of course. They saw the event. It was a charity gala in the blazing Arizona sun. All white tents and clinking glasses, and people in tasteful outfits, pretending the heat didn't bother them. Cameras hovered at the edges like flies. I stood near the back. In a dress borrowed from a closet in the house that had more clothes than I'd ever owned in my life. I watched Dominic on stage, speaking into a microphone, answering questions about second chances, and rebuilding. He looked comfortable up there in a way that surprised me. Confident. Not cocky. Dangerous. But in a different way now. The kind of danger that came from being absolutely sure of himself. "And what's next for Dominic Vale?" a reporter called out. "What are you still looking for?" He paused. His eyes found me in the crowd, like there was a string between us. "For once," he said slowly, "I'm not looking for anything. I already found what matters." My heart did something complicated and inconvenient. The questions kept coming. The cameras flashed. He finished, stepped down from the stage, and ignored everyone who tried to intercept him. He walked straight toward me. "You can't just say things like that in front of cameras," I whispered as he stopped in front of me. "People are going to think you have feelings." "I do," he said simply, before I could come up with a deflection. He cupped my face in his hands and kissed me. Right there. In front of reporters, donors, staff, in the middle of 100 phones raised to catch their next viral headline. He kissed me, like none of them existed. It was bold, warm, dangerous, and so tender. The crowd made some collective noise, gasping, laughing, snapping pictures, but it all blurred behind the rush in my ears. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "Too much?" he asked softly. "Way too much," I murmured. "Do it again later." We went home after the event. Back to the estate that somehow didn't feel like a stranger anymore. The sun was setting when we stepped out onto the balcony off the main bedroom. The sky was painted in layers of orange and pink. The city lights, just starting to flicker on in the distance. I leaned on the railing, looking out at the world that felt a little less terrifying now. The cat jumped up between us, tail flicking, inserting herself directly into the space where our hands almost touched. "Of course," I said, center of attention. As always, Dominic reached out, scratching behind her ears with absent affection. His other hand found mine, fingers threading through, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're quiet," he said. "Don't get used to it," I replied. He chuckled softly. The sound wrapped around my ribs and settled there. After a moment, he said, "You know you don't have to stay." "I know," I said. "You could go back to your old apartment? Your old life." I looked at the city lights, at the road that would lead back to the building with the broken elevator and the noisy neighbors, and the version of me who watched him from across the street and pretended she wasn't curious. Then I looked at him, at the man who had once been a whisper in the hallway and was now the person whose absence I could feel in every room. "I don't think that's my life anymore," I said. He studied my face, like he was trying to memorize every line. "You're home, Emma," he said quietly. Whether you admit it or not, the word didn't sting the way it had when he said it in my apartment, that first day. It didn't feel like possession or a sentence. It felt like truth. I looked out at the city again, at the desert beyond it, at the house behind us filled with too many rooms and, somehow, exactly enough space. "Yeah," I said softly. "I guess I am." The cat yawned, unimpressed, and flopped down on the railing, her tail twitching against both our hands like punctuation. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and then faded. The world went on. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing outside my own life, watching it from a balcony. I was in it, with him, and for a girl who started this story, broke, lost, and just trying to keep a neighbor's cat alive. That felt a lot like home. And if you enjoyed this story, if you felt the tension, the danger, the softness, or maybe even fell a little bit in love with Dominic and Emma, don't forget to support the channel. Hit like so more people can find this story. Tap subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Share this video with someone who loves a good mafia romance. And drop a comment below. Would you have stayed when he said, "You're home"? Your thoughts and reactions keep these stories alive.